outskirts of Bisbee, Arizona, along Highway 80, there stood an old house half a mile from the road, nestled at the foot of a cliff, seemingly in the middle of nowhere. On the morning of March 25th, 1977, prompted by an unnamed relative, a health inspection was carried out at the house. The discoveries made by the authorities in the house and on the grounds over the following weeks left several investigators traumatized, with one eventually resigning. Dozens of notebooks were found in the house, securely stored in a safe, except for one left on the table, accompanied by an unfinished pencil and a concluding sentence written in blood, a single word, scrawled by a wengana. These notebooks contained horrifying details spanning several decades. The residence belonged to Corey Hardy, a 46-year-old individual. Presented below is the initial excerpt from the notebook, dated May 27, 1956. I can't recall precisely when, but from a very young age, an overwhelming urge to commit malevolent deeds consumed me. Dark actions that I knew would define my existence and become my way of life. The memory of the first child I cradled in my arms not too long ago haunts me daily, as she held a special place in my heart. I have reserved a unique spot for her among my children from beyond the grave. It transpired in Tucson, and I spent an entire week searching for the one child who would become my first date, as I referred to her. After some investigation, I identified a serene elementary school that was sufficiently distant from any police station and began monitoring the children during their recess. It didn't take long for me to pinpoint my first target. She was easily distinguishable, always keeping to herself on the playground, away from the other kids. Crucially, she walked to and from school alone. My plan was to abduct her the next day on her way to school, capitalizing on the sparsely populated morning streets. I considered various approaches, but ultimately settled on a direct approach. Pull up, incapacitate her, and stow her in the trunk of my car swiftly to minimize any chance of escape. I meticulously selected a location where there were no houses, offering a clear line of sight in all directions to spot approaching vehicles. The morning arrived for the execution of my plan, and I recall feeling an exhilaration like no other in my life as I observed her leaving her house. A surge of adrenaline coursed through me as she neared the stretch of road where I intended to act. Slowly following her, I anxiously scanned both directions, ensuring there were no approaching cars. As she approached the designated spot just a few feet away, my excitement reached its peak. I vividly recall the moment of execution. I accelerated, abruptly stopped, exited the car, sprinted towards her, and struck her over the head with the baseball bat I had brought. The impact sent her collapsing to the ground. Swiftly I picked her up, opened the trunk, placed her inside, and closed it promptly. Glancing around for other cars, I found none, a stroke of luck or perhaps fate. Suppressing the urge to speed, I eagerly headed home, anticipating the next steps in my plan. The journey took about 2 hours, and as I turned onto the dirt road leading to my gate, I heard her kicks and screams from the trunk. A sinister smile crept across my face as I continued driving. Pulling up to the back door, I positioned the trunk closest to the basement entrance. Opening it, I found her curled up in a fetal position in the corner. Grabbing her by the hair, I pulled her out and dragged her down to the basement. Once in the basement, I tossed her into a corner, undecided on my next course of action. We sat there for hours while she pleaded for release. Gazing into her eyes, I experienced a void of emotion. Knowing the impending acts, I seized the specialized pliers I had selected for this grim purpose from the table. Despite her screams of terror, I advanced towards her. The notebooks chronicled the horrifying details of the atrocities committed against each abducted child. The subsequent entries were recorded in a notebook found on his desk before March 25th, January 2nd, 1977. Last night, in a state of intoxication induced by weed and excessive alcohol, I was jolted awake by a loud knock. Footsteps and giggles emanated from the kitchen downstairs, unsettling me. Armed with the gun beside my bed, I descended to investigate. Upon switching on the kitchen light, I noticed something on the floor. Kneeling down for a closer look, terror struck as I observed muddy footprints on the vinyl flooring. Footprints of a child who shouldn't have been there. With the nearest neighbor miles away and my property secured by a locked fence, the situation unnerved me. In my inebriated state, I dismissed it and returned to bed after a half shot of whiskey. Upon waking, the memory resurfaced, prompting me to rush downstairs and inspect the kitchen floor. Upon scrutinizing the vinyl, there was nothing to be found. It must be the effect of the whiskey and weed, I surmised. January 15th, 1977. Last night, while seated on the couch watching TV, a loud, rhythmic thud echoed from a floorboard in the nearby basement. Memories of the footsteps and giggles from weeks ago flooded my mind, causing the hair on my arms to stand on end. With my rifle upstairs, I pondered the source of the noise, standing frozen as the knocking persisted. The fear grew, and I contemplated fetching my gun. After a while, I approached the origin of the sound and kicked the floor, abruptly halting the knocking. Realizing the necessity of checking the basement, I retrieved my gun upstairs, fully prepared to confront anyone lurking. Upon opening the basement door, I descended the stairs, accompanied by the recurring giggles. I halted and yelled, "Who's there? I'll kill you!" Upon switching on the light, a presence in the rear of the basement caught my eye, swiftly concealing itself behind some boxes. Raising my gun, I cautiously advanced towards the boxes, experiencing fear for the first time in my life. It was an unfamiliar experience. As I reached the boxes, I briskly circled around, anticipating a presence, yet finding no one. About to turn away and inspect the rest of the basement, a sight on the ground caught my attention. Kneeling down for a closer look, I was astonished. Children's footprints adorned the dirt beneath me. Rising to my feet, I began to retreat when a subtle movement at the distant end of the basement caught my eye. Swiftly swinging my rifle and firing in that direction, I hastened to inspect the area, but once again encountered nothing. Doubts crept in, questioning whether I was losing my sanity. Deciding to abstain from pot and alcohol for a few weeks, I aimed to regain clarity. February 7th, 1977. Last night, around 6 o'clock, as I sat at my desk contemplating the impending attack in March, a whisper echoed my name. It was as if a mere whisper, sounding inches behind me. Startled, I stood up, overturning my chair, and shouted, "Who's there?" Standing bewildered, I heard my name whispered again, this time seemingly emanating from the corridor. For the first time in my life, an unsettling chill traversed my spine, leaving me trembling with fear. Over the past few weeks, I had attempted to dismiss the peculiar occurrences, and had refrained from smoking weed or consuming alcohol. However, now I was certain that something was amiss. A palpable strangeness gripped me. Slowly advancing towards the door to peer into the hallway, I discerned the sound of approaching footsteps, more than one person. As I turned the corner to investigate, disbelief washed over me. At the corridor's end, numerous children stood in the doorway, fixating their gaze upon me. I screamed, "Children, what are you doing here? Who are you?" They giggled, darted into the room, and I hastily seized my rifle, pursuing them down the hall. Running, an odd realization dawned on me. The children looked oddly familiar. Reaching the door, I shouted, "Hey kids, come out! You don't want to provoke me!" Silence ensued. Sneaking into the room with my gun poised, I traversed every inch but found nothing. The window remained closed and locked, precluding any escape. Confounded, I sat on the room's floor, staring at the wall for hours. Am I losing my sanity? Is this some elaborate prank being played on me? It has been 5 months since I last laid eyes on him. Could this be the breaking point? I traversed through every conceivable thought, yet found no answers. On February 23, 1977, as I toiled in the basement, preparing for my next sinister endeavor slated for March 25th, an unanticipated event unfolded. Amidst arranging the apparatus, the basement door violently slammed shut. Startled, I spun around. Simultaneously, the lights extinguished, and a voice, reminiscent of a child, whispered my name. Panic surged through me, causing me to stumble, trip over an unseen obstacle, and collapse. Something seized my leg, dragging me across the grimy floor. I shouted, demanding answers, struggling to break free. This was perplexing as I stand at 6'5", weighing 230 pounds. Abruptly, the grip released, allowing me to spring to my feet. I raced to the basement door, flung it open, and attempted to illuminate the surroundings, but the light failed to cooperate. Standing on the stairs, I strained to discern anything in the basement's dimness, but it revealed nothing except the items I had brought. Retreating to my room, I spent the remainder of the day in contemplative silence. The events in the basement left an indelible mark on my psyche. Though reluctant to return, the insatiable urge to ensnare persisted. However, recognizing the need for respite, I opted for a brief vacation. March 15th, 1977. The recent weeks unfolded in tranquility. I finally descended into the basement, concluding my preparations. The eagerly anticipated day, 5 months in the making, is now only 10 days away. As I document this in the wee hours, sleep eludes me. I sit, writing, revisiting past exploits. I want to etch them into memory, never to forget. Wait, did I just hear the creak of the kitchen door opening? Footsteps echo in my kitchen. Wengana, inscribed in blood, marked the conclusion beneath my final sentence. Corey Hardy's lifeless form was discovered in his living room, brutally dismembered, arms shredded, bearing claw-like wounds, indicative of a defensive stance during the attack. Authorities uncovered what they termed children of the grave on his property, an area housing the remains of 23 children aged 6 to 11. Shockingly, DNA analysis of the blood from the last notebook, conducted 30 years later, did not match Corey Hardy's. Instead, it aligned with his initial victim. For more chilling narratives, kindly subscribe.